we were never going to be, Mark Hoppus, the cute lead singer. We weren't that band. And I'm like, I'm not even going to try to compete. So I'm going to do the complete polar opposite. I would joke about it. By the time I was saying that stuff on stage, the record didn't sell. And none of us were surprised by it. By the time that record came out in 2006, things were changing big time. The pop punk scene, it was over.
The career of Less Than Jake has spanned decades at this stage, which is no small feat in the music industry, but also because of how high energy and fast-paced their music generally is. And with their most recent record, there seems to be no sign of let up for that as well. Their record, Uncharted, has the same level of musical zest that they've had from the beginning, in my estimation. And I'm absolutely honored to have a chance today to chat to co-lead vocalist and guitarist Chris Demakes of Less Than Jake. Thank you very much. Welcome to the podcast here. Appreciate it. Now, I'd love to begin asking some questions about vocal harmonies, because for context, my introduction to your band Less Than Jake was the Hello Rockview album some 25 odd years ago, and I loved the high octane punk rock energy of the first track, but it was the second song, Help Save the Youth of America from Exploding, when there's the glorious vocal harmonies within the chorus, but there's that moment where the entire instrumentation goes to zero and is just the vocal harmonies, and my head exploded. How much of a first-class citizen in your songwriting are figuring out the right vocal harmonies for hooks in terms of Less Than Jake? Is that something that's been there from the beginning, or is it something you're working on and honing across your career?
Definitely the latter. Roger and I both learned how to sing together, and Hello Rockview was a really pivotal moment with that, because we had this producer, Howard Benson, who has went on to huge success over the years, but Howard was just kind of coming back after not producing for a while, and Sepultura was his first act, and Zebrahead was another one he was working with very early in their career, and then we hired him to do Hello Rockview. He came in with the first ever edition of Pro Tools. Okay.
Whoa.
Yeah. And we're talking floppy disks. It was crazy. He'd be up all night transferring these files and whatnot. We used the very first ever auto-tune.
Oh gosh.
One of the first. We were one of the first bands that messed with auto-tune, that a product was released. Auto-tune had been out for a couple years, but I think it was called like Auto-Tune 1 then. I don't even think it was called Auto-Tune, and it was made for NASA initially. They were using it to change pitch corrections. I don't know if that was sending signals in space or whatnot. That's what it was created for. And they realized that, oh, wow, we can change pitch of human voice. We could, do this in song. And Howard did a lot of work on that record. He built harmonies. We'd go into the booth. Roger would go in there, and Howard be in the other room with a keyboard going, sing this. It'd be like, ding, 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 ding. He'd be like, whatever the lyric was, da, 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 da. And next thing you'd know, you'd hear it in context with my, lead vocal. Would be like, wow. Well, then came the point where the record was released. We have to go on the road and we have to replicate this. Right. Well, luckily, Roger and I had the ability. We hadn't found it yet, but we had the ability and the talent within us to be able to learn and replicate. And once we did that record and that touring cycle, when we went to the next record, Borders and Boundaries, we were leaps and bounds a band, because and that's a lot of times what a producer does. I've said this before. For bands, they'll come in. I talk about this a lot in my podcast, and not so much for us. I don't want to say Howard gave us our sound. He definitely helped us with our vocal harmony sound and how to think of parts, for sure. Not taking anything away from Howard, but there are producers that have built band sounds. They were these four kids that kind of had these cool ideas, but they didn't really know how the ideas were going to sound like. And a producer comes in and does this, and without getting any too more long-winded, that's basically the harmony situation, and that's the record that got us moving.
It's incredible that a producer for Sepultura ended up helping with the harmony side of things in Less Than Jake.
He was a producer. He started in the 80s. He was doing hair metal bands, but he never got to the next tier. He was doing C and D level bands, a lot of whom I loved. I was all my best friends are metalheads. So
Right.
we all loved our heavy metal, and we liked a lot of the records that Howard had done. And, once the door got slammed in the face of all those guys with the alternative 90s grunge movement, whatever you want to call it, a lot of those producers packed up shop and found something else to do. And Howard kicked around, and he always believed in himself. He's like, regardless of me having a tag as a hair metal producer, I'm a composer, I'm an arranger. A song is a song, regardless of how you dress it up. And he stuck it out, and it was one thing after another. It was like Us, Sepultura, and the next thing you know, he got that POD record. And ever since then, it just exploded. He went to My Chemical Romance. He worked with The Used. He's worked with Daughtry, just huge artists. 3 Days Grace.
Right. Now, in terms of the harmonies with yourselves, I was wondering whether, because you're Roger, who's the co-lead and bassist. When it comes to recordings, are you always doing the backing harmony vocals for each other so that when you're live, you can replicate that as is? Or are you sometimes now doing your own backings and additional harmonies on records just yourself for ease? Or
yeah, we don't really do. I guess these days he'll do it more than I do. Sometimes he'll stick a harmony, but typically we'll have JR do the high stuff, our sax player, behind Roger. I have done harmonies with myself on records before, but it's been a minute. We have enough singers in the band. We try to each do them. And I don't know if this would be your follow-up question, but how do we dictate who sings what songs? And a lot of times that just comes down to, we were out in the studio for the Uncharted record, and there's a song called Brand New Day. And it would just be normal for me to sing the verse, and when the chorus lifts, for him to sing the chorus. And I said, let's switch this one up. Why don't you sing the verse, and I'll reach for that high chorus note. And we did it that way. So, it keeps it fun for us.
Yeah, right. Because Roger, I think it seems like he has a naturally higher sort of vocal range. So I suppose when it comes to, if you want to harmonize higher above that, it's going to be a bit of a reach for yourself potentially. So maybe that's where other vocalists can come in.
It is. And you could do lower harmonies, but typically, and lower harmonies are cool. I do a lot of low harmonies on the new record. I did, one of the longest low harmonies I've ever done in a song is in Walking Pipe Bomb off the new record. The whole chorus, I'm singing this low kind of harmony that's going, you wouldn't really probably even notice it, but it makes it fun for us. We really try our best. We get in rehearsal and we work out the parts and we listen to each other. That's the hard part about being in a band with somebody for 32 years. You don't want to listen to that dude, and that's anybody that's been in a band can testify to that. And I love the guys in my band, but
yeah, sure. That's maybe perhaps where a producer can come on and be like, listening to all of you, I think this might be the right way forward.
Well, yeah, it's easier for the producer to say that, because if I say it, I'm a jerk,
Another thing that I'm interested in terms of the songwriting is, and there's one of these glorious moments in the most recent record, but a key change. Now, in theory, you could put a key change in every song. It's a wonderful uplift moment, but using it selectively, how do you decide, actually, this is going to elevate this song to another level? Let's do a key change upwards.
I think for me, just speaking for myself, when you set out to be like, I'm writing a key change song, typically doesn't work. It feels piecemealed for some reason for me. But when you start working on a song and you're getting to a part, and then you get that aha moment of, oh, let's take them up here and move the key. And if it works, you just know. And usually, we don't use it that much to where it's like, oh, there's the trick again, And I also, when I do the key changes, I try to make them not obvious in a sense. There's a track called Not My Problem on the new record, and it goes up for the horn solo, which is the intro. So it's in G at the top of the song, but it goes up to A. Well, when we come out of that, we go into this little bridge part, and then we go into the third chorus. Well, the third chorus is now in D. It's not in C. Okay. But you, as a listener, you don't feel it because you've been in that A world for so long. If that makes sense to anybody out there, I'm trying to keep this, in layman's terms, but we eventually go back. We change keys again to the original chorus in C, so that's really where you hear it. That key change. Oh wow, there's a key change here, but there's
Yes,
actually two other
it's a
key
couple.
changes in the song. Yeah.
Oh, very cool. And obviously, this is a ska punk band, and there is a brass element to this fairly frequently, but not all the time. There's a couple of moments where songs don't necessarily have that for a lot of it. How do you decide amongst yourself what the balance is for when the brass come in to add some stabs and additional melody things, or is that sometimes do songs get led by someone coming in like I've got this sax part, and you can build a song around that? What's the balance like in terms of incorporating that into the sound?
Yeah, I wish there was more of that. And that's not a knock against JR or Buddy. JR writes songs. Um, Typically, he doesn't write them in. Yeah, I guess he does. Sometimes he'll have a horn part, but typically it's just chords and melodies that he'll come in with. And Buddy is great at writing parts, but they typically don't come in and be like, "Hey, here's a horn idea," because
Mm.
that'd be great to be able to have that to write a song off of. As far as the horns go, they write probably 75-80% of their parts. Sometimes Roger will come in with a horn line. Sometimes I'll come in with a demo with an idea for a horn. But the hard part about the horn is you will orchestrate parts on a guitar. You're like, here's the horn line. And they're
Yeah.
like, dude, this is impossible to play
Yeah,
on the
it's too
horn,
much of a jump.
especially this fast, And okay, let's back off that idea a little bit. Let's morph it. How can we kind of be in that world? And so it's a very uh, in parentheses democratic uh, discussion. we argue like hell about the horns because those are our other voices in the band, and they're kind of right there in the frequency of the guitars and right
Mm.
there in like the tenor vocal range. Okay, so there's a lot of instruments fighting for that space. So to your original question, you got to pick your spots.
Yeah, I was thinking about that as well because there's also when it comes to the bass, there's very busy bass lines in Less Than Jake, and I guess the risk could be the busyness of that could be fighting with the vocal rhythms and perhaps the guitar at the same time. So, do you ever have difficulties thinking like, well, Roger, I do love that bass line you've come up with there, but the vocals are kind of busy. How do we make them both work together, or do you just kind of throw it down on the record and then balance things out
Yeah,
from there?
it's that's kind of what our band is. It kind of is busy and reckless energy and like, whoa, what's going on? So you're kind of doing this for most of the catalog. I think it's like that. I think the bass lines are part of that. There's been very few times where I've been like, man, I think this bass groove has to be different in the verse, and he'll kind of give me a look, and typically he'll be very open and listening because I just don't question his bass parts. He has good instinct and he knows where to go most of the time. There's very few times I've been like, man, I don't think that note works.
Yeah, yeah, he's a very impressive bassist, and also because of that's the hardest thing I've ever tried to do is sing over playing bass. Because for some reason you can ring out a chord and kind of stay there for a bit while you do concentrate on vocal lines, but doing bass individual notes that are different from the notes that you're singing is very, very difficult. It's impressive
Yeah,
work.
it's tough. Even as a guitar player, I there's times when I'll do runs and notes now and in some of our newer songs that it's like, oh, wait a second, I have to sing over that. Okay, how's this gonna go? And you just gotta break it down. And we're working on a song last week. We were rehearsing for a couple shows down in Florida. We had a couple hometown shows in Gainesville, and we were down there, and it's like there was this one song. He's like, man, this is just so hard to sing and play. And sometimes you don't think that when you're writing it. You're just like,
Mhm.
oh, here's the bass thing. I'm gonna go sing it now, and then okay, 3 months later, you're gonna go rehearse the thing, and now you got it. Now you got to do both tasks. And he just had to sit there and just go, and you almost have to look at the neck and be like, here's the vocal. Oh, when I'm here, that's
Mm.
this word.
Yeah.
Oh wow, that's weird. Do. My fingers are doing this, but my voice is swooping. It's
Gosh.
strange.
Yeah, tricky. What drew you to the world of ska punk to begin with? Because I mean, I've been in a ska band myself in my 20s for the most part, and it's a brilliant thing, but it's quite a hard. It's an upfront cost of we need like 7 people to make this work, and in the early days, you can make no money from gigs, so it's quite a commitment to go. We're gonna make this work. This is what I want to do. This is the sound I want to create. What is it about ska punk that helps you push through the difficulty of starting out?
Well, I mean, for me, it was like I'd been listening to music my whole life: punk rock, metal, Motown, dance, pop, hip hop. What MTV, what was on the radio. I was an MTV generation kid, and that was our YouTube. That was our you know window to the world. I'm holding up my mobile right now. I didn't say cell phone. And where was I going with that?
Why Ska Punk drew you in?
It spoke to me. It was one of those. It spoke to me in the sense that I could crack the code when I was listening to it. When I was listening to Van Halen records, there's no cracking the code there. Okay. At least for me as a guitar player, I didn't feel that. There's a jazz component to it. There's a swing to it. But two beers deep, pissed off in a dirty, stinky, smoky bar. Oh, these three chords, I could play those in different order for a 45-minute set and maybe scream over it. So that was the allure. I wasn't a good guitar player. I only knew a couple chords. I had a crappy chord that would short out into this crappy amp, and I got into a dirty practice space and met some guys that had no problem drinking piss warm beer and being in a dirty storage space till 3 a.m. with mosquitoes in the middle of Florida biting you all night. We didn't care. We were creating this sound, and unbeknownst to us at the time, we were purging everything that in life, that any grievance we had, growing up. And as humans, we know we go through these phases of life, and you have this inside you and you have to get it out some way. And for us, it was screaming till 3 a.m. in a mosquito ridden warehouse.
Different strokes for different folks.
If that makes sense. That was kind of a long-winded answer, but like,
there's a compulsion.
It was. I wasn't going to be busting out, no disrespect to guys that do this. And I've known tons of guys that have done this that made it huge in the business, huge stars. But I wasn't cut out to go in to play, 4 45-minute sets of covers in the corner. And on the weekends, recording my songs and maybe hoping somebody hears them type situation. That wasn't me. And that wasn't the guys that I had ended up meeting that were in the band.
Well, it certainly seemed like it was a fun journey from the start. The second concert I ever went to, in fact, was Less Than Jake at the Astoria in London a long time ago. I would have been a teenager at that point. I remember being confused because I was like, I'm so excited to see this band. They're so high energy. This is going to be amazing. I get there. And then what comes on stage is what looked like a 45-year-old man with it turns out a gray wig, like wearing a sort of like American tourist costume. Like, what the fuck is going on? But there was a nonstop kind of fun show levity to it that seemed consistent amongst all your shows. How did that side of things come in? So you've got the songs, you've got the energy, you've got the things you're compelled to sing about, and then you've added this extra flair of fun, also with like a skanking skull guy as well.
Yeah.
How did all of that come into your live shows?
My mother hated it because I was about 22, 23 at the time, or however old I was, 24 years old. And she'd be like, you're a good looking man. Well, why are you going out there trying to look like you're 50? You look terrible. And I just couldn't try to explain to my mom. And she said it out of love. She wasn't trying to be mean. But you had to know where we came from. We came from Florida. Okay. Florida is like the part that we came from. It just working class. It's like a suburb of Brum, just kind of working class people that are just good, middle class, however you want to, just go to work. And we had this band. We were not California. We were not New York at all. And so all of a sudden we get thrust into the major label world. Okay. We're on EMI, and it's hilarious, man. We're doing these videos and they're coming in with makeup and they're trying to get rid of my dark circles that I've had since I was born. I'm of Greek heritage. They get a little worse if I stay up late or whatever, but they're putting makeup on me and it's just hilarious. I'm like the old adage, you can't polish a turd, lady. I am what I am here. And we were never going to be, Mark Hoppus, the cute lead singer. We weren't that band. And I'm like, I'm not even going to try to compete. And that wasn't a knock against me. I'm like, we're not that band. I can't put on nice clothes and try to look cute for the camera. It doesn't work for us. So I'm going to do the complete polar opposite. When a kid shows up in 2001 at the London Astoria to see his favorite band, I'm going to walk out. I used to walk around the venues like that. And they'd be like, people had no clue. And the greatest part about it was the crazy dude they saw walking around in a dark club that they thought was 45, because I'd make the beards look real. It wasn't like, oh, he's got a glued on mustache. Ha, ha, ha. Like, it had to be passable, So the bloke that they saw in the urinal, at the trough 20 minutes ago, holy shit, he's on stage now entertaining me. And it was out of boredom. Every city we would go to, there would be thrift stores. Doesn't matter if you're in England, Japan, all over the world. And they all smell the same, by the way. I don't know what it is. They all have the exact same grandma's basement mothball smell. Weird. But what did you have to do to kill time back then? We didn't have the internet. We didn't, you didn't have these little gadgets in your hands. You were sick of listening to the mixtape for the last 8 hours in a van ride of the same songs. We need a new cassette to listen to, okay? You finally pull up to the gig. It's 4 p.m. They're not going to open the door till 6 to load in. And you look next door and, oh, there's a thrift store. So you could go in and they'd have wigs and silly clothes. And that's how it started. I'd buy a wig, come back to the van. I'd walk out of this thrift store and the guys would laugh. And I'd wear it on stage at night, see if I could fool anybody. And next thing you know, I'm getting really long-winded here. Got a second? Yeah, next thing you know, I've amassed trunks of these things. Okay. I have a wardrobe. I got everything from pants to socks to shoes to shirts to fake teeth to mustaches to now I'm getting into prosthetics. I got putty noses, so my nose looks bigger. It was getting absolutely ridiculous. But we're still on a shoestring budget. Yeah, we're traveling around in a coach. Okay, we're living pretty good for a band, but no one in my band is going to let me have a 200-pound laundry bill a week. It's not going to happen. We're too cheap. We've always been. Roger be like, dude, wash it yourself. Well, where am I going to wash these? Wring them out in sinks and hang them in the back of venues. So lo and behold, this stuff traveled the world. It was never washed. And it would have black spots of mildew all over it. You'd put it on, you'd be itching. It smelled to high heaven. So not even kidding, about 2002 or so, Kerrang runs this contest. Win Chris from Less Than Jake's road costumes.
Oh, God.
And I'll never forget, we're in Norwich. And this woman pulls up in a hatchback with her like 15-year-old daughter, and the girl gets out, oh my God. And we're taking pictures. And I told him straight up, I said, this stuff's not going to fit in that car. You can't keep the bins, because I was going to give him everything. Just shove it in the back of a truck or something. We took all this. It stunk to high hell. We took it out. We shoved this woman's car full. It looked like an episode of Hoarders. And off they drive away with my stuff. I still wonder where the hell that's at. They couldn't have kept it all these years.
That is astonishing. Because I was also thinking, like, space is at a premium in a tour bus or van. You got your trunks full of clothes. Like, wow.
Yeah, it used to be we kept some of them in the trailer, but yeah, they'd be under the bays of the bus, and I'd have wigs in my backpack, and it just got ridiculous. And there'd be times I'd be going through and like, you'd get the side eye from like customs officials and stuff. They'd be going through your bag and they'd see like 3 wigs and glasses. Now they're looking for fake IDs and explosives. What's going on here?
Jesus God. Another of the things I've enjoyed from yourselves is occasionally you will do a tiny gig. I remember you did a gig in the Barfly in London to like 80 to 100 people.
Yeah.
This is maybe 10, 15 years ago or so. What inspires you to do gigs like that? Because it is no small undertaking to get all the gear there and do the sound check. And it's not going to be a financially smart thing to do these tiny gigs at the scale that you are. So what's the inspiration to do shows like that on occasion?
Well, if I believe correctly, I think that might have been a fan club show where they got first dibs on tickets or something. It was something. I remember doing a bunch of meet and greets that night, and it's a way to give back to what we call the super fans, the fans that have been there from the beginning, the fans that eat, breathe, and sleep. Sleep the band. It's also, the one thing I'm proud of is that, and I've used this example before, this exact example. I've played the Greenfield Festival in Switzerland to 60,000 people. True story. On a Saturday or whatever. And the drive overnight in our coach. And I wake up in Italy at Rock Planet. Okay. Ravenna, Italy. Playing to 400 or 500 punks like on a Sunday night. So I went from 60,000 on the main stage to 400 or 500 people. And we delivered the same show. And I had just as much fun, but in completely different parallel worlds. That's how we cut our teeth. You know, we played every shithole from here to, you know, Timbuktu. We've also played some of the most beautiful places and everything in between. And, you know, every day that I get to a room, doesn't matter if it's a bar, the Barfly, or I get to the 60,000, I'm out there. I take a look of where I'm at. I look around and I go, all right, this is where the show's at. Now, how do I make this work for us? You know, how do we make this work? And a lot of times the venue ends up becoming material. You know, like, hey, have you checked out those toilets? And the toilets are just, you don't even want to walk near them. Yeah.
Yeah. I know I've seen you play the main stage at Reading Festival, which is another massive crowd. I think I saw there was a circle pit going around the front of house, you know, stage. When you, but each show, whether it be tiny or huge, does feel like it's completely connected between the crowd and yourselves. It feels like we're all in this thing together. How do you achieve that on the scale of something like a Reading Festival? Is there anything that you're consciously doing to achieve that sort of thing?
Yeah, you know, for me, it was always, certainly you're going to pay attention to those that are in front of you, but the guy walking 100 yards that way with a hot dog, that's who I want to talk to. You know, hey, and I'll make a scene. People like, what is this lunatic going on about? Like, here he has 30,000 people from. He's worried about a guy with a hot dog that's walking away from his band, and I'll make that part of the show. And now people back there, I've got their attention, and maybe you'll bring a couple of them in. You know, AC/DC, they're the world's biggest bar band. Okay, they're a boogie bar band. They're in the world of like the ZZ Tops, just like that band that can go out and jam for 4 hours and just play the same song over and over, and they're great. And you know, they cut their teeth and hone their craft in crappy bars. And you got to get the place shaken. You know, when we would walk into venues, it's like, I'm not wasting my time in Daytona Beach, Florida on a Saturday night. We drove 2.5 hours to come here, and we're going to deliver. And that was kind of the mindset. You know, we would go, and we wanted to continually be a better band.
Yes. And upcoming, there's an excellent festival in the UK called Slam Dunk, which you are playing at. How do you decide a set list for something like that, given you have now decades and tons of albums? Do you in any way keep a record in your mind or somewhere of songs you have or haven't played in a particular market in the last 10 years? Well, let's bust out one of these. Or is it very much this year, this is the selection of songs we really want to kind of balance and put out for a particular show? How do you coordinate that yourself?
Well, you know, again, you're only going to disappoint the 30 or 40 diehards that go, I can't believe they played the same 8 songs they played last time here. You know, the rest of the crowd's not going to know. They're going to be oblivious most of the time. So, you know, there's that. In terms of Slam Dunk, it's very easy to remember what we played last time because we performed Hello Rockview in its entirety.
Right.
We were contracted for that because it was the 25th anniversary of the record. So in 2023, we played that at both shows in its entirety. So that was easy. But typically when you go out and do festivals, you know, you got to play the songs that you know work in a live context. Okay. You know, we have to play for ourselves. I've always said that. And we will throw in the odd B-side or something. And that does stoke out those 30 or 40 people. But you kind of got to go for the jugular. You can't go out and play the weird Japanese B-side, you know, 3 or 4 of those in a 45-minute set in the middle of a field in England. You gotta go for the jugular. Yeah.
You got a crowd of, friends. There are 5 of them jumping up and down, going mad. The rest of the crowd is just in a little bit of a lull, going, we'll just wait for the next song.
A little bit of a lull. I've seen them. I've seen them fill the toilets. You know, hey, come back. We'll play Metalheads. Come back. Yeah. Come back.
Amazing. Yeah, that is tricky. You mentioned playing the Hello Rockview album in full. I recall a time where I think you did 3 gigs in a row and did a full album, a different album in a row. That might have even been at the Astoria.
That was
at
the Mean Fiddler.
Mean Fiddler.
Yeah,
right,
we did 6 nights at the Mean Fiddler.
Yeah, that is an insane undertaking of rehearsing and remembering and delivering those songs. How did you feel at the start?
It was 6 nights in a row, from what I remember. We were insane. 6 full albums in a row.
How
different
did you feel
albums.
going into the first gig, and then how did you feel at the end of the 6 nights? What was that bookend like?
Financially, we had to do it because it's just, as you know, it's expensive to tour in England, and it was back then. And we were coming in. We didn't get a coach. We stayed down the road, Tottenham Court. What the hell was that? We used to stay at this hotel, the Grafton Hotel. So we stayed at the Grafton, and it was about a mile walk down to the venue. And we had these 6 shows, and it was like, okay, we could take days off, but we're just going to hemorrhage money. And that was 20 years ago. So I was 31, 32. Actually, it wasn't that long ago. I was older than that. I was 34. It was in 2007 that we did that. But nonetheless, we came over. We had done it in about 6 months prior to that in the States. But we did 2 shows in Jacksonville, day off. 2 shows in Orlando, day off. 2 shows in St. Petersburg. So we did the same 6 records, and it went so well. People had flown in from England, Europe, I want to say maybe Australia, Canada. People came in from all over the place to see these records. And we knew that we were, still had enough of a following in the UK that we could do it. Went over and did that. The UK it's just been one of those places, going back to the costumes, for instance, a lot of that too. I think that we connected. We were always kind of tongue in cheek, slapstick humor, the lowest common denominator, silly humor. And man, the Brits are just all about Benny Hill, the young ones, and that type of humor. We always found hysterical, and I think that. That's one of the reasons that we connected. We got great exposure over there early on, and at the height of our, whatever you want to call it, commercial popularity, we did 3 nights at the London Astoria. That's 7,000 tickets.
Yeah, that's no joke.
When we were doing that at the time, I remember saying to myself, we have to have a hit to get to sustain this. And that wasn't a knock against my band. I remember being like, enjoy this. And we can go over there now and still have a great career. Maybe not do 7,000 tickets in London, but the appreciation is we set out as a band and we did greater things than we ever thought. A lot of my favorite bands are from England. I dreamt of going to England, never ever fathomed being there, and to have my band that be one of the biggest areas that it's mind blowing, and I got goosebumps talking about it. It's awesome.
That's great. Yeah, it's a wonderful combination that Less Than Jake has, where the songs have urgency and importance and they're real, but there's a human natured aspect to things which you get more of a sense of live. I remember there was one particular moment. I was at a Manchester gig, and I couldn't believe you said this. You had just released an album. I think I can't remember the name of it now. It had Still Life franchise on it.
Yeah, and with the Out Crowd
touring, right? And you'd said at some point during your set, like, listen, buy our record is the most recent record. If you're like, it's not our best, I know we kind of like phone this in, and the next one we'll do better. And there was some voice that came through your speaker in front of you going like, are you drunk? Like, why are you telling them not to buy this? Is that just like a bit for jollies, or do you post album go like, I left more in the tank, or like it wasn't exactly how I'd hoped it would be? How much of that was just for yucks?
It's funny. I've always been of the mindset when a band puts out a record I don't like. Okay, when Metallica put out Load, I didn't like throw the record in the air, burn it, and be like, I'm done with Metallica. I'm never listening to them again.
Yeah.
Punk fans are very protective of their artists. And I felt by In With the Out Crowd, and I was definitely pushing for different elements, okay? Maybe some different textures. And we ended up working with Howard Benson again, who produced our biggest record to that. Well, Anthem was maybe worldwide our biggest record, but nonetheless, Howard had produced our most famous record, let's say, Rockview. And we brought him back, and it was just tough. The label had an idea. We had made Anthem, and it did what it did, but they're in the business of selling records. And as much as I love AC/DC, I didn't want to make the same record again. I wanted to try to branch out. And at the end of the day, when you listen to it, it's still Roger and I. It's still the harmonies. It's undeniable what band it is. It's not like, oh my gosh, yeah, we took a left turn. But I would joke about it. By the time I was saying that stuff on stage, the record didn't sell. And none of us were surprised by it. By the time that record came out in 2006, things were changing big time. The pop punk scene, it was over, unless you were Green Day or Blink or the bands that had the more staying power. But that's basically it in a nutshell.
Sure. Yeah, I suppose by that point you would have an idea of the response there. But I mean, for what it's worth, I fucking love that album. I think it's fantastic. I think Still Life Franchise is one of my favorite songs. It's so very good.
What's funny about that record is that, albums are snapshots of what you're going through as humans, as people. And, when we made that album, we were, as we've mostly been, although I feel like our fans are catching up to us in a weird way. When I look out in the audience, I see a lot of gray hair now. But back in the day, our audience was 7 to 8, 9, 10 years younger than us. They hadn't gone through divorce we had. They hadn't gone through loss of friends on the scale that we had, or loved ones. So now, 7, 8, 9, 10 years later, the reviews of that record, they're revisionist history. Let's put it that way.
Right. Then when people can relate to them, like, it's going to kill me the rest of my life. That's a song about lifelong regret. It's like, oh, I get that at this stage, but yeah, back then maybe it's trickier.
And we could have done that song, Ska. It's gonna kill me. Dun, 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 dun,
Yeah.
But it's not going to hit you emotionally. We play that song. There's grown men in the audience crying. So, for me, I'm glad you like it. I'm very proud of that record.
Yeah. Well, listen, as we're bringing this conversation to something of a close at this stage, I was wondering, at the stage that you're at and you've experienced all you did, you're talking about there was that big boom for ska that happened at a particular point, but it's still very much going and strong. There's plenty of amazing UK ska bands over the last few years. How do you see the scene from your point of view as you're out and touring a lot? Is it in a very healthy, sustainable state? Do you see any buzzings of resurgence of it in future? Where do you see the torch being passed in future, if you will?
Wow. I kind of feel like there's more bands doing the ska punk thing right now than there has in the last 15 years. It's definitely not a 4-letter word anymore. There's a lot of great bands doing it. But it hasn't went to the next level where you could say, oh, it's the fourth wave, if they're going to even name it that or whatever. It's the next thing. And wow, it's still ska, but they push the boundaries. It's different. I've often said, I think it's going to be like maybe electronica, dance elements mixed with horns and mixed with upstroke guitars. That could be the next thing. I haven't heard it yet. I doubt Less Than Jake's going to do it, although I'd be willing to experiment. Howard Benson, you there? But yeah, I think the scene is healthy from a underground standpoint. There's people going out to the younger bands and seeing those shows. And then there's bands like Less Than Jake that are bringing them out. We're going out this summer with Suicide Machines and Fishbone all over the United States. We got Catbite opening half of the shows, and the other half is going to be Bite Me Bambi. And those are two bands that have been out there killing it. We've recently played with Kill Lincoln, a band called Jur, a band called Omnigon. They were down in Gainesville, a band called Half Past Two. So there's a good amount of bands that are flying the Ska Punk flag.
That's great. There was a big moment last year, as I just recall now, when Ice Nine Kills did a song with Real Big Fish, which kind of spanned even the metal scene. We're like, what is this? This is kind of interesting.
Yeah, I've had Spencer on my podcast a couple times. He's a dear friend of both myself and the band, and he's a ska kid. He grew up listening to our stuff. He actually had JR and Buddy play on a track a number of years ago. Had Real Big Fish come out. In fact, their horn section went out and did some arena dates. He's going back out with Metallica this May. It's Metallica, Ice Nine Kills, and Pantera. So they're killing it.
They're amazing live, to be fair. They deserve the success they're getting.
Really I love the band. I think what they're doing is very unique.
Yeah. Perhaps then to close, just pivoting from that most recent record, which sounds as urgent and zestful as the earlier Less Than Jake moments in Uncharted, What drives you to keep that level of pace and energy in the music as you do at this stage? What is keeping you kind of motivated to keep writing such kind of urgent, amazing, impactful stuff at this stage?
Well, I'd like to say it's vodka and amphetamines, but it's not. It's coffee though. Coffee and I think it's the love of still getting in a room with these guys and making music. We're not doing this for money. Because if we were, we're in the wrong business. It's tough. Prices are globally through the roof right now. Touring's tough. You don't know what's going on with tariffs and taxes and going into other countries and money. And should we do this? And at the end of the day, you have to do what feeds your soul. And going back to what you asked, it's like getting in that room with these guys and creating songs and then recording them. And, we went out to the blasting room in Fort Collins and recorded with Bill Stevenson from Descendants and Jason Livermore. And that was just, we hadn't left Gainesville to record anywhere in almost 20 years, been like 16, 17 years. And we went out to Colorado and we were out there for like 10, 11 days and we just zoned in. We got away from everything at home and went out and just had the time of our lives. And I've often said that you can hear that come through onto the music. You can hear that energy that you're speaking of.
Yep. And I think that's probably gone a long way to the longevity of the band, is the audience feel that, they respond to that. And it's great. You're doing great guns. I'm looking forward to seeing how you get on with Slam Dunk coming up in the UK this summer, and that massive tour you just mentioned in the States as well. Thank you very much again for your time today, Chris. I really appreciated chatting to you.
Thank you. And can I give a shameless plug of my podcast
Please?
Before we go?
Absolutely.
Yes, my podcast is called Chris Demakes, a podcast. Ha ha.
Brilliant name. Brilliant.
Yes. So go check it out. All your favorite songwriters and then some. I break down one iconic song from an artist catalog each week, every Monday, new episode. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, well, I'll put a link in the description as well so people can just hop over to there and check that out as well.
And I talk about my weightlifting career, but you can see how that's going. Anyways.
Wonderful stuff. Thank you very much again, Chris. Best of luck this year with the music. That was so much fun chatting to Chris Demakes there from Less Than Jake. Someone I've been a fan of their music for decades now. It's a real privilege to be able to chat to them about the songwriting and the moments of history throughout that band and the gigs and things they've done that are of interest to me. Like it's not lost to me how fortunate I am in a position to have these conversations with people I just massively admire, and what a joyful, fun, and interesting person they were to chat to. So hopefully you enjoyed this as well. I'll put some links in the description to Less Than Jake's socials so you can keep up to date with their tours and gigs and any future music they got coming up. I'm looking forward to seeing them at Slam Dunk Festival this year. That should be pretty fun. I hope you subscribe to this. If you enjoyed this interview, make sure you do so, and you can get more interviews like this in your YouTube feed or in your Spotify, wherever you're listening to this podcast. Thank you for tuning in. Hopefully I'll see you in another one very soon.